GP Fantasy Football Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and we're brought to you by our Patreon. It's Dave and Brad. We're talking Dynasty, and we want you to be able to score exclusive perks using our Patreon contest and content, including our NFL win totals contest with a $1,000 prize. Join today at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and get last-minute tickets at the lowest guaranteed price. Use promo code SGPN for $20 off. What's going on? We got some huge news today. We're going to talk about that. Expo is awesome. Shout out to Bob Long and everyone that was there. Des Bryant. Don't want to get too much into the Expo, but I will say it's an awesome time. Met a lot of awesome people, and if you have not gone there, you should probably go do that. Got to hang out with Mr. Brad, and so appreciated that. Brad, how are you today?
Oh, doing pretty good. Back to reality, unfortunately, though. We were down there in Canton for 3 days, living it up, talking football nonstop without a care in the world, and then back to work today. So luckily, we're back to football again.
And so we're back, and some big news. So if you haven't heard already, Dalvin Cook has an intent to sign with the Jets up to $8.6 million. I don't know the full details of the contract. For Ezekiel Elliott, he signed about an hour earlier to the New England Patriots. He announced it himself. He's going to be number 15, and he got a $3 million base salary, $1 million sign-on bonus, so $4 million guaranteed. Pretty good money, especially with the running back market these days, and then up to $6 million with incentives. So, Brad, the first question is, what are your thoughts if you just drafted Ramondre Stevenson in your league about, the second, third round?
I'm a little disappointed, but not as much as maybe a New York Jets fan may be right now, mainly because Ramondre Stevenson carrying, 88 targets the guy got last year. 88. Zeke had like 22 or 23 targets last year. He's not taken that workload away from Ramondre Stevenson, so the floor is there for Ramondre. The ceiling may not be now because of some of the bulk goal line carries that may end up going to Zeke now. So I am a little disappointed. But if I ended up drafting Ramondre Stevenson in the third or the fourth round of a dynasty startup draft, I'm not really too worried about it long term necessarily.
Yeah, for me, if I'm still targeting him in my redrafts, and obviously for Dynasty, I'm still targeting him. But I will say this does lower his upside, but in the future, it'll probably lower the cost. So those of you that were buying him at kind of the premium, that is what hurts. It's because you were buying him that he's probably going to drop about a round. I would say he goes in the fourth or fifth round now, closer to like Alexander Madison, Miles Sanders type of a deal, and not up there in the top 11, 12 running backs. And it was funny because I was really, really wanting him today. Came around the turn. I'm like, all right, give me Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson. I'm fine. My buddy double tapped Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson. And I was like, damn. All right. I missed out on Stevenson, but then the news happened. And then Dalvin Cook goes to the Jets. Breece Hall, obviously coming off of an ACL injury. And we talked about injuries last week, and we've all got kind of numb to the ACL injury. Like, it's nothing. Like, it's like sprained ankle, ACL, pretty much the same thing. They're not. ACL is a significant injury, even if it's a clean tear with no other ligaments. Typically, a player is not at 100% to start the season. It's a 9 to 12-month recovery time, and you do have the potential for other, calf, lower body, hamstring, quad. That leg tends to get hurt with soft tissue injuries, and they usually are up to full speed by the end of the year. What are your thoughts here if you have Brees Hall, who's also going around the 10 to 12? Yeah.
I'm terrified. I mean, you look at Dalvin Cook, he had his second most carries in his career last year. 264 carries for almost 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. So a lot of that bell cow work could end up going to Dalvin Cook to try to protect Brees Hall, who is clearly a future for the New York Jets in that organization. But not only that, 56 targets, Dave. 56 targets. So this dude is an all-purpose back. We saw it as early as last year in a really good season for Dalvin Cook, a top 12 from a fantasy perspective. I think he was number 10, number 11, depending on your scoring format. So that terrifies me for Brees Hall this year. Now, it is a one-year deal, long-term, not a huge deal. So that buying window may open up a little bit right now. And right now is the time to strike because people are going to start to panic. The longer you wait, the more they're going to calm down, the more they're going to be like, it's okay, it's only a year. But if you can strike while the iron is hot, you might be able to get him at a fairly reasonable price.
Yeah, and so you still got other running backs on the market, and now you're seeing the dominoes fall. And so you could see Kareem Hunt, who's bounced around to several different teams. He's visited with the Saints, the Colts, the Vikings. He could end up going somewhere. And your teams like the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins that everyone has thought was going to get one, the future's getting a little brighter and brighter for those guys. And whether it's Devon Achane or Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, James Cook, Damian Harris, those guys, obviously injury is a huge part of this, but as long as everybody can stay healthy, all those guys are looking a lot better now that Ezekiel Elliott and Kareem, and Dalvin Cook are not going there. But we still have Leonard Fournette lurking, Kareem Hunt lurking, Darrell Henderson out there as well. And we could see some players be cut when we see some different moves, things like that. But let's get into the main portion of the show. Brad, can you talk a little bit about what the consistency rankings are?
Oh, for sure. So we took a look at just kind of the average of a big group in each position. So for the quarterback position, we looked at the top 35, took the average of that, and then said, okay, what was a good game? What was a great game? What was a bust game? And then we said, okay, we really want to see what percentage of games played a player was in the good and the great range. That's really what you want to see. You don't want those bust games. You want that consistency. So we looked at the top 35 for the quarterback position. We looked at the top 75 for the running back position. We looked at the top 100 for the wide receivers, and we looked at the top 40 for the tight ends to get those averages and kind of weighed out how we wanted to see that consistency. Again, we broke it into 3 tiers: a bust category, a good or average category, and a great category. So you see me sporting my Cleveland Browns here, right? We talk about Nick Chubb. We've been talking about all these running backs that are signing. I have made a point since I've moved to Northeast Ohio to go see my Brownies at least a couple times every single year. Last year, I spent $275 for tickets in the lower section. Absolutely astronomical. Super stressful trying to talk my wife into that. But now there is a much better way to buy tickets, and that is Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for any and all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can now stop stressing over all the tickets and start getting hyped for all that fun you have. So I just used this past weekend, talking to my buddy, saying, all right, guys, what game are we going to go to? We want to go see the Brownies kick the living crap. Plug your ears. I don't want to use curse words on here. Kick the crap out of the Cincinnati Bengals. And guess what? I found tickets almost the exact same spot for almost $100 cheaper than I spent last year for a team that's got Deshaun Watson for a whole season. I thought I was going to pay out the rear end. So you've got to go to Game Time. It is the first place you should check for last minute ticket deals. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. So download the app, create an account, and use our code SGPN for $20 off your first purchase. The terms do apply. And again, all you got to do is create an account and use our redemption code of SGPN for $20 off. So download the Game Time app today or go to gametime.co. Not gametime.com, gametime.co for the lowest price guaranteed.
That sounds good. I'm looking at some Colts tickets. We'll see what we'll do.
Go.
We got the consistency rankings for the quarterbacks. So the first one up is Patrick Mahomes. No big surprise. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Mahomes and Hurts were the only players to average 25 plus points per game. Then you have Joe Burrow, Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones sneaking in there, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, and then Tom Brady, who obviously is not here anymore as far as the NFL. So what are your big takeaways out of the top 12?
Out of the top 12? Oh, the consistency is not as good as what we may have thought, right? You look at guys like Justin Herbert down in the, close to the 50%. 59%. That's not great from a consistency standpoint when you're looking at the number of bust games that he had last year. Now, you can kind of talk that out of existence if you want. Well, he had Keenan Allen hurt some. Well, he had Mike Williams hurt a little, and they brought in a new offensive coordinator. You want to see that jump a little bit in consistency. That's the narrative right now. So do you take the advantage of Justin Herbert and that consistency being a lot lower last year than it has been historically for him, and the new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, the new addition of Quentin Johnston, and say, you know what, that consistency has to go up, and his ADP around like the QB 8 may be worth the shot right now, and you could still end up with a top 5 quarterback in Justin Herbert.
So I'm looking over there at Dak Prescott, and you talked about Herbert and how, the Kellen Moore connection. Dak Prescott's production, that offense that Dak Prescott was in, is now being translated over there to the Chargers. So we could see more consistency, obviously having healthy pieces around him. Herbert had a left tackle out for half the season, had both of his top receivers out for half the season, and he was hurt since week 2. And so a lot of excuses, but we'll see how he does next year. But I do like the Kellen Moore. And then Dak Prescott was 75% good and great. That's good for Dak as well as good for Justin Herbert. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Dak right now. I moved Dak this season because of the change in the offensive coordinator and losing Zeke, a little, Pollard coming off the leg injury, although all reports are just glowing around him. I just think there's a potential for a little bit of regression from him, and it worries me just a smidge. He lost his security blanket in Dalton Schultz as well, and people don't really talk about that a whole lot, where we've seen Dak not be great when Dalton Schultz was hurt. So I worry a little bit about Dak from a consistency standpoint. I think he's going to be a little bit more volatile because of the loss of Dalton Schultz and Kellen Moore as the offensive play caller.
So what's interesting to me is if you look at everybody after Herbert, Tom Brady's out of the league. Aaron Rodgers changed team. Lamar Jackson's got a new offensive coordinator. Tua, things are staying the same. Russell Wilson, new offensive coordinator. Derek Carr changes team. Dak Prescott, new offensive coordinator. Kyler Murray probably misses about half the season. Marcus Mariota is a backup. Davis Mills about to be a backup. Andy Dalton, backup. Mac Jones, I'll give him a pass because he literally had 2 defensive coordinators trying to figure out how to play offensive coordinator. Like on the job training in the NFL.
Not the way to go.
Not the way to go. But seriously, guys, come on. That was really bad for Mac Jones' development. Hopefully Bill O'Brien can right the ship for Mac Jones. Jacoby Brissett, backup. Jimmy Garoppolo, he changed teams. Matt Ryan out of the league. I mean, you just see what I'm saying. Like these consistency that keeps your job. And that not only is from an offensive coordinator standpoint, and I know fantasy points isn't necessarily a depiction of what exactly is going on in the NFL, but come on. Like, I
Yeah,
just went through the whole
right.
list. Tua is the only one in the same situation outside of the top 11.
Yeah, there is one that I want to pick your brain a little bit about because going through some of these redraft or best ball leagues, seeing Kyler Murray's consistency at 82%, saying, okay, yeah, he may start on the pup, but hey, what if you get 9 games at the back end of the season of Kyler Murray returning to form? Is that something you're willing to take the shot on? Do you trust that that's going to happen? Or are we worried that Kyler Murray may just end up getting the pine the entire season just from a protection standpoint?
From a redraft standpoint, I'll stay away from Kyler Murray. If he's your second quarterback and you're kind of taking your shots, yeah, I'll take the shot on him over, Mac Jones and take the upside because if I have a starter that can get me through those 6 to 9 games, I'm worried that there's probably not going to be a lot of running. You get him back off of injury, the team's probably going to be in pretty bad shape by then. I mean, they got my Giants week 2, so they're definitely getting an L there. But I think that they're probably going to maybe sneak one win before Kyler returns, if not be winless. And then what's the point of putting him out there and trying to go, be 500? But for a dynasty standpoint, he is a massive buy low. He is a perfect candidate if you have a team and you're rebuilding. You want to trade a veteran for him. You could trade a lot of these guys for him right now, but you trade Dak Prescott for Kyler Murray plus Kirk Cousins for Kyler Murray. I mean, you can get him on the cheap right now, and then you're gonna have a monster squad in 2 years when you have him plus a first or him plus a second.
Yeah. There might be a couple other guys that, I mean, obviously the rookies aren't on this list, but a couple other guys that didn't make the cut because they didn't really play enough games that are going to be starting quarterbacks this year, and Desmond Ritter and Sam Howell. So do I know we're talking consistency, but do you think either of them could be a 50% consistent type of quarterback, and why?
Well, if you look at it, I mean, you got a new offensive coordinator in Washington, so it's hard to look at what Carson Wentz did. But I look at what Marcus Mariota did. And so this is why I thought Desmond Ritter would have been a really good Scott Fishbowl pick by looking at Marcus Mariota's scoring. And Ritter's not going to run as much, but I think he's set up for success in that offense. They don't ask him to do a whole lot, and he's got some rushing ability. He's got some weapons, and then most important, he's got a good offensive line. And so, if you haven't seen, Arthur Smith went to the mustache this year, so he's upgraded himself. And so, I think things are going to be good for him this year. Not just the mustache, but I think this team's steadily progressed. I think they have a good shot at winning the division. And you want fantasy football, you want your fantasy football players on winning teams on good offenses. I think this is going to be an okay offense. Bijan Robinson's a great addition. You get Kyle Pitts, Drake London. They still got Cordero Patterson, Tyler Algier, and a great offensive line. So I look at that, and that's what I see as I translate what Mariota did. I think Ritter's better. I think he can do just as good, if not better, than him.
Yep, I love that. And I'm as much as I liked Sam Howell coming out, I thought he got crapped on a little too much after his junior season where he lost both his running backs, his offensive line, 3 of his wide receivers, the whole shebang. But if you look at the offense that Ron Rivera was running, his quarterbacks are right there at number 30 and 31, and Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz, guys at 33 and 38%. That is not good from a consistency standpoint. So you hope that the addition of Eric Bieniemy coming in and saying, okay, let's figure out how to use Sam Howell could bump those numbers a little bit, but that is a 100% projection and maybe not a shot worth taking in redraft leagues. If we're talking dynasty, which most of the time we are on this show, I still don't know if I'm willing to take that shot on him right now. I had him in a couple leagues. I ended up moving him in both of them, even though coming into the season, the offseason, I was kind of high on Sam Howell. The more I looked, the more I worried, the more I was like, I'm not comfortable with it. Let me sell while I know he's a starting quarterback. Is he a guy you're looking at saving? Are you trying to sell him? Like, where's your head at with Sam Howell?
Well, I'll tell you about Sam Howell in a second. We got an exclusive for you guys. That's if you sign up for our Patreon, you get access to exclusive contests, including the NFL wins totals contest with a $1,000 first place prize. So I want to make sure you guys know about that. We also got a season long contest. They also have week long contests that are exclusive for Patreons. We have plus a monthly SGP stories podcast, completely ad free and full behind the scenes stories from SGPN. There's even a Discord channel just for our Patreons. We also have you can the only way to prevent corporate gambling is to help guys like us do your part and sign up today. sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. So Sam Howell with him, I mean, for me, it's at the end of the day, you can make a story for all of these guys to have a good season. But at the end of the day, there's only going to be 15 guys in the top 15. There's going to have to be another 17 guys that don't make that cut. And so it's really hard for me to make that story for Sam Howell. I know he had one good game last year as far as fantasy production, but most of that was based on the fact that he scored a rushing touchdown. And his passing was not good. It wasn't good. I think it was completed 10 passes, had like 130 yards, and then he happened to have 35 rushing and rushing TD. And so I'm not very high on Sam Howell this year. I do like the weapons, but I still think that it's going to be a struggle. And I do think they lean on the running game there in the Bieniemy offense. You're not going to see a Patrick Mahomes style in offense there. He was the run game coordinator. He had nothing to do with the passing game.
Yep, we'll see how it goes. You ready to move on to the run back?
Let's talk running backs. And can you tell us how it's sorted as well?
Yeah, so it's sorted based on final fantasy point finishes based coming from Fantasy Pros. So just typical half point PPR based on yardage and touchdowns, fumbles, that kind of thing. No crazy scoring or anything like that. So the numbers on the left of your screen are all about just their final finish in fantasy football rankings. Whereas, like I said, the great, average, and bust is all based on, for the running back position, the top 75. In order to have a great game, again, this is half point PPR, so don't get crazy. It's greater than 18 points. For an average game or a good game, it is between 9 points and 18 points. And then anything less than 9 points is what we are considering a bust game.
Yeah, and I love what you did here because this is exactly what I think about when we had our conversation last week. And, you look at end of season scoring and it's all about how did they get there? Yep. A lot of times, Kirk Cousins ends up as a top 10 guy because he outlasted everybody. And, if your team doesn't play in week 17 or you miss 2 or 3 games, you're going to outlast. That's why Andy Dalton sometimes would end up higher on the list than he should be. And so I look at points per game basis, but I'm also looking at other things. There's a lot of guys like we talked about, Joe Mixon and Aaron Jones. Sometimes it's hard. You don't see back-to-back weeks of good production, and that's frustrating for your lineup. But they end up in the top 10, and it's the ADP is going to say to grab them. They're going to be at the top of that best available board for a long time going, okay. And you're like, well, he's finished his 9 last year. I'm going to pick him up. So Eckler and McCaffrey, extremely consistent. Josh Jacobs was not as consistent as I thought, 71%, but still pretty good. Henry, 75. Chubb, 76. Saquon, 81. And then you have Tony Pollard at 69, and he essentially was the backup. Then Jamal Williams was also backup. We'll see what his role is. Aaron Jones, 53%. Then Ramondre Stevens, 71. Mixon actually higher for 73. What are your thoughts on the top 12?
Nothing is super surprising to me. We all kind of knew Jamal Williams was that touchdown guy. If he didn't get those couple touchdowns, he wasn't catching the ball a ton. He kind of crushed you from a fantasy standpoint, which is why you see those 6 games as a bust. I think the surprising one for me is Aaron Jones, because had somebody asked me before I started looking at this, how many games do you think that Aaron Jones really kind of screwed fantasy squads? I would not have said half the season with a top 10 finish like what we saw with Aaron Jones, because typically he's a fairly consistent player from a fantasy standpoint. So that was very shocking to me and made me think a little bit about, okay, what do we think the Green Bay Packers could look like this year with Jordan Love now at the helm? Are they going to lean on Aaron Jones more? Are they going to continue to try to integrate A.J. Dillon? Or are they going to kind of move away from him? Are they going to move to more of a pass first type of offense? Like, what is that offense going to look like? And it actually raised a little bit of concerns for me from Aaron Jones, because I think you're going to what I believe is going to be a less productive quarterback in Jordan Love, with a ton of youth at the wide receiver position. So teams are likely to look at it and say, you know what, we're just going to shut down the run and make Jordan Love beat us, which is going to make it even more challenging for Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So I do have a little bit of concern for Aaron Jones moving into the 2023 season.
Yeah, and he was the one that I mentioned his inconsistency at the same time I mentioned his consistency last week. I said he's consistently in the top 10 at the end of the season, 4 years in a row. Like, there's not many other backs that do that. But I said he was not very consistent last year, and Brad gave me a T. Higgins. What? and he's just a guy that a lot of people don't think about that. I had someone put a post up on Facebook, was like, Aaron Jones is screaming value right now. And I was like, I'm not trying to poo-poo on your post, but why? He's being drafted at like RB16, and you're like, what's the profit?
Yep.
You're not going to get him. He's not going to be above RB, 16, 17 many times. So like last year, he was RB28, then RB2. Then he was RB52, then RB19, RB32, RB27. This is in PPR.
Yep.
RB4, RB12, 2 good weeks in a row. You finally, I'm getting comfortable. RB30. Then RB4, RB15, RB11, his best stretch of the season. Then RB28, then the bye week right before your fantasy football playoffs. In your fantasy football playoffs, he gave you RB11. Then he gave you RB42. Then you're probably kicked out. And then he came back RB16, and he finished off RB32. And so it was just it was a rocky road for him, minus that one little stretch.
Yep.
Anybody that stands out to you that was further down the list?
Najee Harris. The hate on Najee Harris is real about how inefficient he is and blah, blah. Like, look, this dude is a stud. 82% of the time you can count on him in your lineup. 82% of the time. He gave you less bust games than the number 3 overall running back in Josh Jacobs. Less bust games than Nick Chubb, who is my man. Derrick Henry. Like, the list goes on and on. The only people that busted less than he did in the top of this list are Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey. Like, that's the tier that you're looking at Najee Harris possibly being in, right? And we saw him with over 300 plus touches his rookie season. He turned around. We saw a little drop in production with Mac Jones. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Kenny Pickett at the helm. We hope that we see growth from that rookie quarterback moving into year 2 in the same system with the same offensive coordinator. They've addressed some of the offensive line issues. So just think about this. Najee Harris, with as bad as the Pittsburgh Steelers offense was last year, was a good or great running back 82% of the time. If there's even a slight uptick in that offensive performance, you're looking at easily a top 10 running back. And I mean easily a top 10 running back. So I think he's a screaming value right now. I think people are sleeping on him entirely too much, and this just solidifies that fact for me.
Yeah, there's only about 5 or 6 backs that you look at and say this guy's probably going to get like that. Probably this guy's going to get 20 plus touches, and Najee's on that list. And so everybody we've brought on the show, Eric Moody, Marcus Grant, Michael Florio, all of them have said the same thing. It's like he's just a value, and maybe he's not as efficient as some of these other guys, and he's not going to get the targets he got as a rookie. But a healthy Najee Harris and an improved offensive line. The only concern I have is Matt Canada sticking around. That would have been like the real, helpful thing. But Calvin Austin looks good. They added Darnell Washington as another blocker, another weapon. George Pickens here too. I think this offense is going to be better. And Najee Harris is going to be the best piece. And then so I was really looking at like Look at 16 and 17. Ken Walker, who people kind of look at as like a boom bust player, 73%. Travis Etienne was really good last year, only 47% of the time, though. That's tough.
It is. There's a couple I really like in the 20 to 30 range. James Conner, if you need a piece, go look at it. And people will say, "Well, yeah, but Kyler Murray and he's going to be out." Okay, so let's just talk through what James Conner did when Kyler Murray was out. RB4, RB5, RB12, RB4, RB15. That was his final 5 games of the season. That is massive value at that position. There is nobody on that team that is taking carries or receptions away from James Conner. I get it. We like Keontae Ingram. He might take some work, but some work to me means like a 80-20 split, if that. Like, I think James Conner's a screaming value for that last piece that you may need that you can get absolutely dirt cheap. And his consistency was really good, 69%. He was more consistent with Kyler Murray out of the lineup than he was with Kyler Murray in the lineup, right? So I think that's something, a narrative you can play in your own head right now, to where you can get a guy in your lineup for the first 5-6 weeks and maybe even the entire season, based on what we talked about a little bit earlier, how Arizona may just say, you know what, we're going to play it safe with our franchise quarterback, and we're not going to rush him back if we're out in the season anyway. So James Conner is number one. The other one I think is Dameon Pierce. Looking at that 69%, that's really nice. I think the one concern that you have to at least think about is, does the new addition to the running back room affect his performance? Do some of those carries go to Devin Singletary, the backup now there in Houston? Maybe, maybe not. But you saw Dameon Pierce start to break down a little bit towards the end of the season, right? So I think that's what Houston saw. That's why they brought somebody in that can take some of that workload off of Dameon Pierce. And that may actually help his consistency, because now instead of getting hurt 5 plays into a game, he might be able to last throughout the entire season. So I think Dameon Pierce is a guy you should think about in your dynasty leagues or in startup dynasty drafts, of somebody that could potentially be a value way down the list down here right now.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the receivers.
All right.
And so we'll talk about the scoring here.
Okay, so the scoring for the wide receivers, again, we took the top 100 wide receivers. A great game. Again, this is half-point PPR based on the averages. A great game would be greater than 17 half-point PPR points. A good game would be between 8.5 and 17, and a bust game would be less than 8.5 points.
And so your guys here at the top, Tyreek Hill was looks like the most consistent. Justin Jefferson, probably expect that to be a little bit higher. They have AJ Brown. Remember, this is a combination of good and great games. Some of the guys with, really great games, but they have a few of those not as good games. We'll weigh this out. AJ Brown, I thought, for him, if he didn't score a touchdown or 2, he had 100 yards. And so it was like every week. And so I think, it was AJ Brown and then a combination of either Dallas Goedert or Devonta Smith. You didn't necessarily see all 3 pop off every week, but it was AJ Brown for me. It was like I drafted him today, even though I hate drafting Eagles. I had to, because he's right there, and it was locked and loaded. And it was an inconsistent player in Tennessee, mostly because of injury, but also because of the offense. Looking at, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's at 69%, almost 70%. Really, really consistent guy that was supposed to not do anything once TJ Hawkinson came back and once everybody got back. It's kind of all these excuses for what he did his rookie year. And he was really good last year. And how many it was 5 bust games? That's one of the lower bust games.
Say that again. Sorry.
one of the lower number of bust games there. I mean, look at AJ
Oh,
Brown
yeah.
only had 3, Tyreek Hill only had 2. I mean, most people had around 5 bust games. If you had less than that, then that's really freaking good. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase. There's not many people. T Higgins. Not many people that were below that mark.
T. Higgins, my man. So you talked about AJ Brown as the one that jumped off for you. Tyreek Hill was the one for me. Like, it's just every single week this dude is destroying. The low number of bus games for him is impressive considering he's next to Jalen Waddle as well. So when I look at that, I'm thinking, okay, is there a potential for that to kind of equalize out a little bit this year? Could we see Tyreek Hill start to trail down a little bit? I'm not saying he's still not a top 2 or 3 wide receiver from a finish, like a 2023 finishing standpoint, but could you see that start to equalize a little bit to where now Jalen Waddle starts to creep up a little bit and maybe be poised to be the one in that offense in 2024? So could you see that start to creep up a little bit? That's kind of my hope, right? I'm really excited for Jalen Waddle. I almost kind of hope to see that happen this year. And then the other one for me was seeing T. Higgins super high at 73% from a consistency standpoint made me pretty happy, right? It just solidified for me that even if he does stay in Cincinnati and they find a way to pay him, he's still worthy of being that top 10 to 15 wide receiver in dynasty rankings. So that just, seeing these, it helped me make some moves based on what I think some offensive changes are and whatnot. And luckily for me, because of my love for T. Higgins, even though I'm a Browns fan, helped me solidify that spot for him.
Yeah, and you look at Cooper Kupp down there with 89%, and you look at what his value is right now. Like, Cooper Kupp she's a screaming value in your leagues. And I know he's coming off an ACL injury. We just had this conversation. With the way they target him in that offense, it's really hard to see him not being a really good receiver this year. I think the only thing that concerns me with Cooper Kupp, and it is big, is Matthew Stafford's health, and does he play all year? Because if Matthew Stafford plays all year, then, yeah, you could see a lot of the same. If he doesn't, and you got Stetson Bennett or somebody else out there, you just don't know. You don't know what it's going to look like, and the quality of those targets typically will go down. And so that could be a struggle there. But 89% sticks out like a sore thumb, and he only played 9 games, and he still was wide receiver 24.
Yeah. The DJ Moore is the other one you can use. And unfortunately, the preseason game that happened yesterday, and he had his screen pass that he took for a long touchdown, it's probably not an opportunity anymore, but you could use statistics like this to drive maybe a little bit of a value shift to be able to get DJ Moore on the cheap and say, hey, look, DJ Moore, 53% consistent last season. You hope that increases with Justin Fields. So you can use all of these statistics in trade negotiations to try to drop his value a little bit, get him a little bit cheaper. So, like I said, unfortunately, because of that preseason game, that's probably not the case anymore because the hype is real for him again. But, this is the type of thing you can use in those trade negotiations and may help out a little bit.
Yeah, and you look at guys that had the good games. There's a lot of those guys. Like, those are your wide receiver 3s and wide receiver 2s. You have Tyler Lockett, Terry McLaurin. 10 times they were in the good category. They don't have the upside. They're not giving you a lot of wide receiver 1 performances, but they end up 10 times. You have Chris Olave 8 times, Michael Pittman 8 times, Chris Godwin 8 times, DK Metcalf 9 times. Very consistent. And then you look at the bust side, and you're seeing guys like Adam Thielen busted 11 or 10 times last year. It's a rookie quarterback.
Yep.
You taking him or DJ Chark?
DJ Shark.
You got Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd. Juju Smith-Schuster had the best quarterback in the league. He busted 9 times. Gabe Davis 8 times. Zay Jones 9 times. So, that's what kills you. Those bust weeks are what kill you. And so you look at the end of the season rankings and say, wow, this guy was wide receiver 26, pretty good. 9 times he busted, 11 times, 10 times. Like, I'm out. I don't want that lineup headache. In best ball, fine. In head to head, you cannot have this line. These guys are lineup headaches.
Yeah, I do think you use that in some context, right? Because I can look at Chris Olave, right? Highlighted him. You see him 67% for those of you that are watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure you
hit that subscriber button.
Yeah, man, I was hoping you'd be on cue with it. But either way, 67% with absolutely pathetic quarterback play. You hope that the addition of Derek Carr stabilizes that offense a little bit. And now you see a little bit of an uptick in consistency from Chris Olave. Garrett Wilson, 53%. That dude finished as the wide receiver 19 as a rookie, over 1,000 yards with the mess that was the quarterback position in only 53%. And now you add Aaron Rodgers. That consistency could his consistency go down? I don't think so. Allen Lazard was 60% with Aaron Rodgers. Like,
yeah, you're looking.
He's going to be way higher than that now.
Garrett Wilson had 4 different quarterbacks last year: Chris Streveler, Mike White, Joe Flacco, and Zach Wilson. Just no bueno. And then you do have to take, like, we're not saying that you need to take these and copy and paste it to this year, because there are changes that are going to happen. Garrett Wilson is a prime example. Look at Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both finished in the top 20. They had Tom Brady last year.
Yep.
Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield are duking it out for the quarterback one. That's not good. It's hard to see both of them finishing in the top 20 this year. Zay Jones probably not going to be top 26 with Calvin Ridley in town.
Yep. Terry McLaurin's the other one to think through here, right? 65%. How do you feel about Sam Howell? Do you think Sam Howell is going to be better than Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke, or do you think he's going to be worse? I think he's personally going to be a little bit better, but do you think that Terry McLaurin's consistency is going to go up with the addition of Jahan Dotson? There's a lot of factors that play into that. So does that make Terry McLaurin maybe a little bit of a sell? Because to me, I think he is a little bit of a sell right now. You can use this to say, hey, look how consistent Terry McLaurin was with terrible quarterback play last year. And you make that move now for a guy that's really kind of already in his prime, even though he's been in the league for only a few years, and you get out from under him before that efficiency metric maybe starts to drop. They have another quarterback next year if Sam Howell doesn't pan out. Like, you can use these and then what's happening with the team around them to make really good dynasty decisions.
Yeah, and for me, like, I'm a more risk adverse player. And so I 100% understand the point of shooting for upside, because you want to win your league. But at the end of the day, I'm not Ricky Bobby. It's not, if you're not first, you're last. Second's good. Third is fine. I want to make the playoffs. And you're going to make the playoffs by having these guys that are just steady Eddie, and you can ride them out. And of course, having a guy like Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes, that'll put you over the top. But if you have these these teams with all of these boomer bust players, then you're really putting yourself in there for for some issues and not making the playoffs because there's so much inconsistent play. And I love what you said about Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard is definitely a guy that I've been targeting in all my leagues as my 5th or 6th receiver. I've always been an Allen Lazard guy, so I will say there's a little bit of but he's been good, and he was good with Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers. He missed 4 games and still had 8 touchdowns last time he played with those two.
Yep.
And he blocks like a lineman. He's never going to leave the field. Like, he's going to be out there a lot of snaps, and Rodgers has a good connection with him. I think he could easily be the number 2 in targets behind Wilson. They paid him quite a bit of money.
Yep. So I feel the same way about this guy right here. Again, if you're on YouTube watching, you can see who I'm highlighting. But for those of you listening, it's Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. Everybody thinks, oh my God, he had an absolutely horrific season last year. But he was 67% consistent. He had 10 games that were classified as good. So again, that's greater than 8.5 PPR points in half-point PPR leagues, from 8.5 all the way up to 17. And only 5 bust games in what was an absolute disaster for the Denver Broncos. So now insert Sean Payton. Another year with Russell Wilson to build some rapport. There could be a chance for Courtland Sutton to see a spike in value. He is right now really, really, really cheap. And if you don't take a chance on him, I think you're missing the opportunity to really have what I've talked about in the past. In those startup leagues, if you can hit in the 7 to 10 range, that's where you make your money. That's how you win championships, is in that range. And Courtland Sutton, you might be able to get later than that and be able to plug him in as a consistent flex play and potentially have some really good upside if we see Russell Wilson being able to return to form with Sean Payton calling plays in the offense.
Yeah, and then you look over at DeAndre Hopkins and Keenan Allen, both those guys, they missed some games, so at the end of the year, it doesn't look as good on the stat sheet. You go, oh, he's 42 and he's 47. This is exactly why I'm saying you do not use the end of the year total to evaluate players. Look at that. 89 and 90%. Literally the two best in this entire sheet. And there's no one that's going to be better in there unless Brad let somebody that played one game and had one good game sneak on the list, like Matt Collins or something.
I didn't. Watch me scroll down. There's 100 somewhere.
And Matt Collins played a lot of games and did not do well. So let's move on to the tight ends. Unless there's anyone else on that you want to talk about.
No, I'm good. Courtland Sutton was the last one, and I wanted to kind of throw out there a little bit.
I really wanted to see Kelsey with just 100. I mean, he had one bust game. Did they not play? Probably. I think
he played 17 games.
17 games. Did the Chiefs play a half or something? We had to look at that.
I'm sure it was probably the last week of the season.
Come on, I took Kelsey 1-0 at the 5 spot in a super flex poly playoff league, but there's a bunch of receiver bonuses, and I'm gonna take Travis Kelsey. Hawkinson switched teams on us and still is 65%. Taysom Hill, get out of here.
Week 13 against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay.
Four catches for 56 yards.
Taysom Hill at the 5 spot is just what's going on. But you're looking at some of these guys where Higbee, I thought would have been higher. Not surprised by Juwan Johnson, even though I do think he's like a poor man's version of Chig right now. He's pretty cheap, going on tight end 20 in your redraft leagues. Dynasty's getting a little bit higher. I like him in that offense with Derek Carr, and he was definitely your boomer bust guy. But he had some good games last year.
This is why. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant real quick here. So Dynasty panel at the FF Expo, we had a couple guys that were talking about how in tight end premium, you punt the tight end position. Luckily, there was one person on that panel that was like, whoa, wait a minute. Look at this. Look. Those guys right there. 11 great games for Travis Kelce, 5 for George Kittle, 5 for Mark Andrews. Look at everybody else for great games. 0, 1, 3, 2, 1, 0. That's the tight end landscape. If you can get one of those top 4, even in a non-tight end premium league, it is a massive advantage. A massive advantage. Not to mention an even greater advantage if it is tight end premium. So please, if you're in a tight end premium startup dynasty draft, you have to evaluate. I'm not telling you have to do it, but you should at least at a minimum evaluate what it looks like to take a tight end early. and you want to go get one of those big four right off the bat between Kelsey, Hawkinson, Kittle, and Andrews. Some people love some of these other ones, but those are the four right now that you really got to pay attention to. So sorry, I just need to get that out.
Now, and I'm absolutely a early tight end guy. I have two early picks like yesterday and today. Took Mark Andrews in the second yesterday in my home league redraft, and I took Travis Kelce in the first round. And both leagues, I planned on taking Darren Waller in like the fifth or the sixth, but I just because like I'm just taking him, and so Darren Waller still could happen.
Yeah.
I think it's a massive value. I would put Waller up there as the next guy for this year. I think Ingram sees some regression, but he's going to be probably a middle round guy for you. And if you have to punt the position, I would say you got to collect a few, and you're going to have to play the streaming game and just hopefully get lucky and hit. But for me, I'm absolutely trying to get one of those top, for me, 5 guys, because I'm putting Waller in there, and then walking away from it. I just don't feel comfortable with spending, because like Brad said, you get really good players in the 7th, 8th, 9th. I know you get really good players in the 2nd and 3rd. I get it. But I'd rather get one of the top end guys and not reach for tight end later, because I feel like I have to fill the position, get a premier guy, and win your league.
Yep. So the one guy I want to talk about is Dallas Goedert here. He's currently coming off the board as looks like around tight end 7 is what I'm seeing right now. And that just seems like a screaming value for a guy that is 83% consistent at the tight end position, right? Would you rather have Dallas Goedert, who granted it looks like finishes as number 12 here, or Cole Kmet at number 7, who busted 11 times? Who do you think is better for your lineup? The one that finished higher or the one that's super consistent? So, I mean, that's a screaming value to me at the tight end position. So take a look at Dallas Goedert. Again, 83% consistent. And then he did miss a few games because of injury. So,
yeah, and you got Zach Ertz down there was 80%. News today that he's ready to play.
Yep.
And so that's that news snuck in there with all these other things. So if Ertz plays, that's not good for Trey McBride, good for him. But yeah, consistency is important, and so make sure you guys are looking at this stuff. Brad, I think I'm good.
I'm good, bud. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I didn't do this earlier.
Hit that God button.
Make sure you guys hit that subscriber button. If you have any questions for your drafts, please let us know. Shout out to Sports Gambling Podcast Network for all the stuff for the Fantasy Football Expo. They host the party on Friday, a great party. And Kramer and Andrew are doing a 24-hour best ball podathon. They're going to be on YouTube, on podcast. They're going to be raising money for charity. 100% is going to go to charity. There's going to be some amazing prizes. Trophy Smacks donating. All 22s donating. There's a couple others. We got a lot of stuff going on there. Giving stuff away, raising money for charity. Make sure you subscribe to the Sports Gambling Podcast Network or the Sports Gambling Podcast YouTube as well. So appreciate you guys. We're only 3 weeks away from football, regular season football.
Yeah.
And as always, good luck this season.
Cheers.